Imagine walking into a grand music hall filled with the world's most talented musicians, only to be met with scorn and disbelief. Now imagine being blind, young, and black, standing there with nothing but your passion and your dreams. This was the reality for Alana Monroe, a woman who couldn't see the piano keys beneath her fingers, but heard every note in her soul. When the famous pianist Luca Ravelli publicly mocked her presence, many thought that would be the end of her story. But what happened next was beyond anyone's expectations. Alana's response wasn't just a performance. It was a revelation that challenged everything the music world believed about talent, perseverance, and truth. Her journey from being laughed at and underestimated to leaving the world speechless on one of the biggest stages shows us that sometimes the brightest lights come from the darkest places. This is her story. In the heart of Atlanta, where the echoes of jazz once floated through the streets like a fragrant breeze, lived a young woman named Alana Monroe. She was 26 years old, black, and blind since birth. Despite the darkness she had never seen beyond, Alana carried herself with quiet confidence, her soft curls framing a face that often wore a thoughtful smile. Her white cane tapped a steady rhythm against the pavement as she made her way through the city, a sound as familiar as the beats of the old jazz records her mother loved to play. Alana's life was shaped by music. It was more than just sound, it was her language, her connection to the world around her. Though she had never learned to read sheet music in the traditional sense, her fingers danced across imaginary keys, composing melodies in her mind. Music was how she felt the world's colors, its moods, and its stories. Every day, she made the same journey to the old public music conservatory nestled between towering brick buildings in downtown Atlanta. The conservatory was a place where many talented young musicians came to train, hoping to follow in the footsteps of greats. But Alana didn't belong to the conservatory, not officially. She didn't own a piano, nor had she ever taken formal lessons there. Instead, she often sat quietly just outside the main recital hall, her hands weaving invisible tunes in the chilly air. She loved to listen. Most days no one paid her much attention. The musicians came and went, focused on their own practice and performances. But one person always noticed, Mr. Ramsey, the elderly janitor who had worked at the conservatory for decades. He understood music's power and saw something special in Alana. He would often leave the door to one of the practice rooms slightly open, allowing the sounds of piano scales and concertos to spill out into the hallway where Alana sat. "She's got music in her soul," Mr. Ramsey once told a curious student nodding toward her. "She hears what we can't even imagine." On a crisp autumn morning, a buzz of excitement filled the conservatory. The internationally acclaimed pianist Luca Ravelli had arrived to host a masterclass, a rare opportunity for the students. Luca was tall, with dark hair swept back and piercing eyes that seemed to scan every room like a predator assessing his territory. He was Italian, and his reputation preceded him not just for his flawless technique, but for his sharp tongue and unyielding standards. Rumor had it he once stormed off stage mid-performance because a violinist dared to miss a note. Alana, curious and eager to be near the music, stood at the entrance of the recital hall. Tap of Pi, it's because NTHOKEYS through the EMOTI, the ON, all El Walka. Her heart fluttered with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Though she longed to be inside, she hesitated. The hall was full of accomplished musicians, and she felt out of place. Suddenly, the heavy doors swung open, and Luca Ravelli stepped out, his presence commanding the room. He scanned the crowd of students, his gaze sharp and calculating. That's when his eyes landed on Alana. "Who is that?" he asked loudly, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Why is she here?" A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned toward Alana, who stood frozen near the door, gripping her cane. "This is not a school for sympathy," Luca continued, his tone dripping with disdain. "It's for musicians." The words stung like a cold wind. Alana felt the weight of every eye, the cold judgment in his voice. Hurt but refusing to break down, she turned to leave. Before she could step away, Mr. Ramsay stepped forward from the back of the room. His voice was steady but filled with quiet strength. "She's got more music in her soul than you'll ever understand," he said. The room shifted uneasily. Some students chuckled awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. Luca's lips curled into a smirk. "If she's so talented, then let her play," he challenged, his eyes gleaming with a mix of arrogance and disbelief. Alana's heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't prepared for this. The challenge hung in the air like a thick fog. She froze, unsure whether to accept or run, but deep inside something stirred, a fierce determination that had grown in the silence of her world. She slowly nodded. No one had expected her to say yes, and that was the moment everything began to change. The sun had long disappeared behind the tall buildings of Atlanta, when Alana quietly made her way back to the music conservatory. The streets were almost empty now, lit only by the soft glow of street lamps and the occasional flicker of passing headlights. Her cane tapped gently on the pavement as she moved with steady purpose. The day's harsh words from Luca Ravelli still echoed in her mind, but Alana felt something deeper, an unshakable fire stirring inside her. When she arrived at the conservatory, the building was silent except for the faint hum of the heating system. Mr. Ramsay was waiting for her near the back door, his eyes warm with encouragement. "I've unlocked the piano room," he said quietly, gesturing toward the heavy wooden doors at the end of the hallway. "The Steinway is waiting." Alana nodded. The thought of the grand piano made her heart race. To her, the piano was more than an instrument. It was a sleeping dragon, a beast of power and possibility, just waiting to be awakened by the right touch. She could almost feel its breath beneath the polished wood. As they entered the room, the golden light of a single lamp cast long shadows over the glossy black surface of the Steinway. The room smelled of old wood and faint traces of polish, memories of countless performances lingering in the air. Mr. Ramsay set up his old video camera on a tripod near the corner. "I'll record you," he said. "Let the world decide what your music is worth." Alana sat on the bench, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the keys. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment, listening to the silence that surrounded her. Then, with a gentle press, her fingers found their places. But what came next was nothing like the classical pieces Luca might have expected. No Mozart, no Beethoven. Instead, Alana played a melody born from her heart and mind, a haunting, soulful composition she'd carried inside her for years. It was inspired by the whispers of voices she'd heard in her dreams, the rhythm of the city outside, and the deep well of emotions within her. The notes flowed effortlessly, sometimes soft as a breeze, sometimes fierce as a storm. The music told a story of struggle and hope, pain and beauty. Mr. Ramsay stood silently by the camera, tears streaming down his weathered face. He had never heard anything so pure, so raw. The piece ended with a long, lingering note that seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with meaning. For a moment there was only silence. Then Mr. Ramsay slowly clapped, joined by Alana's soft, relieved smile. That night, Mr. Ramsay uploaded the video to the internet, titling it, "Blind Woman Silenced by Pianist Responds with Song." By the next morning, the video was everywhere. Millions of people watched in awe as Alana's fingers moved over the invisible keys with such emotion and precision. Comments poured in, praising her courage, her talent, her unique voice. Many were moved to tears, but as the video spread, something strange began to happen. Among the countless shares and reposts, music lovers and experts noticed a melody strikingly familiar. A melody that echoed the tune Alana had just played. The twist, that very same melody had been part of Luca Ravelli's European tour 2 years earlier. He had performed it countless times and always claimed it as his own original composition. Whispers began to swirl online. Fans debated whether Alana had unknowingly recreated Luca's work or if something more was at play. People began digging into Luca's past performances and recordings. A few sharp-eyed viewers noticed odd similarities between Alana's piece and Luca's claimed compositions. The notes, the phrasing, even the emotional intensity, they were nearly identical. How could this be? Alana had never left Atlanta, never heard Luca's concerts, and certainly never copied anyone else's music. Her compositions were born from the quiet world she lived in, from memories only she could feel. As suspicion grew, Mr. Ramsey contacted a trusted musicologist, Dr. Evelyn Shaw, hoping to uncover the truth. Dr. Shaw's analysis shocked everyone. "It's undeniable," she said after comparing the two pieces. "The melodies are nearly identical. This is not a coincidence." The story exploded across social media and news outlets. Had Luca Ravelli stolen music from a blind woman no one believed in? Was he hiding behind fame and arrogance to claim credit for what was never his? The music world was about to be rocked to its core. Meanwhile, Alana sat in her small apartment, unaware of the storm brewing beyond her windows. She just knew one thing for certain: her music was her voice, and now the world was finally beginning to listen. As the video of Alana's performance swept across the internet, the questions it raised began to grow louder. How could a blind woman who had never traveled outside Georgia produce music so strikingly similar to that of Luca Ravelli, the renowned pianist whose European tour had featured nearly the same composition? The public wanted answers. The music world buzzed with speculation. News outlets picked up the story, turning what was once a quiet conservatory drama into an international scandal. Amidst this chaos, a respected musicologist named Dr. Evelyn Shaw was brought in to analyze the pieces side by side. In a small, quiet room filled with stacks of musical scores and instruments, she listened to recordings of both Alana's and Luca's melodies. With every note, her disbelief grew. "The match is uncanny," Dr. Shaw said, her voice steady but amazed. "The phrasing, the structure, even the subtle emotional shifts. They are nearly identical. This isn't mere coincidence or inspiration. This is plagiarism. But how? How had Luca Ravelli, a world-famous musician with access to the finest compositions and performers, come to claim a piece that clearly belonged to someone else? The answer came from an unlikely source, Mr. Ramsey, the conservatory's janitor. As the scandal unfolded, he was quietly conducting his own investigation. One afternoon, while cleaning out an old supply closet tucked away in a forgotten corner of the building, Mr. Ramsey noticed something unusual. Behind a pile of broken chairs and dusty boxes lay an old, battered notebook. The leather cover was worn and cracked, but the name on the front was clear: Alana Monroe. Curious, he carefully opened the notebook and found something extraordinary. Inside were pages filled with Braille sheet music, detailed compositions written in the raised dots only Alana could read. Each page was marked with a date and a title, all in Alana's careful handwriting. These were her original creations, carefully crafted over many years. "She's been writing all this time," Mr. Ramsey whispered to himself, almost in awe. "All these beautiful pieces, and someone's been stealing them." The discovery was a game-changer. Mr. Ramsey immediately shared the notebook with Dr. Shaw and the conservatory's director. They began to reference the compositions with Luca's known works. The pieces that Luca claimed as his own were nearly identical to those in Alana's notebook. The truth that emerged was shocking. 5 years ago, a young intern at the conservatory, Michael Daniels, had access to the locked practice rooms and storage areas where Alana's compositions were kept. Michael was known for being ambitious, eager to make connections in the music world. Unbeknownst to anyone, he had secretly borrowed the notebook and made copies of Alana's music. But the story didn't end there. Michael had since left the conservatory and now worked as Luca Ravelli's personal assistant, a role that gave him close access to the pianist and his creative process. When confronted with the evidence, Michael broke down. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," he confessed. "I showed the music to Luca, hoping he might be interested in promoting a fresh sound, but Luca, he took it as his own. He said if anyone found out, it would ruin both of us." Michael's confession rippled through the music world like a thunderclap. The public reaction was fierce and immediate. Social media exploded with hashtags like #justice for Alana and #expose Luca Ravelli. Fans of classical music, activists, and everyday people joined together to demand accountability. News programs interviewed experts, and even fellow musicians voiced outrage at the betrayal of artistic trust. Luca Ravelli, once revered, was now under intense scrutiny. Sponsors dropped his endorsements, concert halls canceled his upcoming shows, and his reputation crumbled under the weight of the scandal. Meanwhile, Alana, who had lived quietly for so long, became a symbol of resilience and truth. Her music, once hidden in Braille notebooks and whispered through empty hallways, was now heard and celebrated worldwide. Despite the chaos, Alana remained humble. "This isn't about revenge," she said softly in a rare interview. "It's about honesty, about giving every artist the respect they deserve, no matter where they come from or what challenges they face." Behind the scenes, Mr. Ramsey continued to support her, helping organize exhibitions of her music and connecting her with teachers and collaborators who could bring her compositions to life. The conservatory also pledged to improve security and ensure that no other artist's work would be stolen or ignored again. But perhaps the most important change was in how people saw Alana, not just as the blind girl with a cane outside the conservatory doors, but as a powerful, original artist whose voice could not be silenced. Her story was far from over, and the world was finally ready to listen. The invitation arrived like a beacon in the dark, an elegant cream-colored envelope embossed with gold letters from the International Classical Gala in Vienna, the very heart of the classical music world. Alana Monroe had been invited to perform live on the same prestigious stage, where Luca Ravelli was scheduled to close the night's performances. News of the invitation spread like wildfire. The media couldn't resist the drama. The blind underdog vs. the fallen maestro. Headlines screamed across newspapers and online platforms. Social media exploded with debates, predictions, and support for Alana. It was the story everyone wanted to watch: a young, blind woman challenging a once revered pianist who had been exposed for plagiarism. Alana herself was overwhelmed but determined. She knew this was more than just a performance. It was her chance to reclaim her voice and show the world who she truly was. She arrived in Vienna with Mr. Ramsey and her mother, Mariah, who had always been her rock. The city's old-world charm was breathtaking, but Alana's focus was on the stage ahead. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but unpretentious, and sat alone backstage, her white cane resting beside her on a small chair. The soft murmur of the crowd drifted through the curtains, a low hum of anticipation. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of thousands of eyes waiting, watching, judging. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, centering herself in the quiet space before the storm. Across the stage, Luca Ravelli sat in the front row, his face unreadable. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod, a gesture heavy with guilt and regret. Alana didn't respond. There was no room for words here. The music would speak for her. Suddenly, the announcer's voice echoed through the grand hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alana Monroe." The spotlight found her as she stood, her cane tapping softly against the polished wood floor. She walked confidently to the Steinway grand piano at center stage. The lights warmed her skin, and for a brief moment the world seemed to hold its breath. She sat down, adjusted her posture, and let her fingers hover just above the keys. Then, with a deep breath, she began to play. This was not the haunting melody from the viral video. It was something new, a composition she had created in just days, fueled by the whirlwind of emotions she had experienced, the pain of betrayal, the struggle for justice, the bittersweet taste of forgiveness, and the unshakable strength she had found within herself. The music flowed like a river, sometimes soft and delicate, like a whisper, sometimes fierce and roaring, like a storm. It told a story without words, a language only music could speak. The audience was spellbound. The notes seemed to paint pictures in the air, each chord carrying a weight of meaning that touched every heart in the room. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, the hall stayed still. No one moved, no one clapped. For a moment the crowd was too stunned to react. Then, slowly, a single clap echoed from the back of the room. It was joined by another, and then another. The sound grew louder and louder until the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause. Alana's eyes brimmed with tears, not from sadness but from the overwhelming rush of emotions. She had done more than play music. She had told her story, her truth, with nothing but her fingers and her heart. Backstage, her mother and Mr. Ramsey smiled through tears. They knew this was a victory far greater than any award or recognition. Luca, watching from the audience, stood slowly. His face was pale, and the guilt he carried seemed heavier than ever. For the first time, he truly understood the cost of his actions, not just to Alana, but to himself and the music he had betrayed. After the performance, Alana was approached by journalists, fellow musicians, and fans. She spoke softly but with unwavering conviction. "This music is mine," she said, "not because I'm the best, but because it's who I am, and music belongs to those who create it with honesty and heart." The International Classical Gala became a turning point not just for Alana's career, but for the music world itself. It sparked conversations about integrity, recognition, and the true meaning of talent. Alana's journey from the streets of Atlanta to the grand stage of Vienna reminded everyone that sometimes the most powerful voices come from the most unexpected places. And as the applause continued to ring in the hall, Alana Monroe knew she had found her place in the world, not just as a blind woman, but as a true artist whose light could never be dimmed. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Luca Ravelli's scheduled performance at the International Classical Gala was abruptly canceled. Concert halls that once clamored to host him shut their doors. Sponsors, unwilling to be associated with scandal, pulled their support overnight. His name, once whispered with admiration in the highest circles of the classical music world, became a byword for deceit and betrayal. The legacy Luca had spent years building, a legacy resting on stolen brilliance, crumbled before the eyes of an unforgiving public. But while Luca's world fell apart, Alana's was just beginning to shine. Music schools from every corner of the globe reached out, inviting her to perform, teach, and inspire. Record labels offered contracts, eager to bring her original compositions to audiences worldwide. Journalists who once overlooked her now clamored for interviews. Her story, a tale of courage, talent, and resilience, captivated hearts everywhere. Even more remarkably, a foundation was established in her name, the Alana Monroe Foundation for Blind and Disabled Musicians. Its mission was clear: provide resources, scholarships, and mentorship to talented musicians who, like Alana, faced barriers but refused to be defined by them. At her first major press conference, held in a bright, bustling hall filled with flashing cameras and eager reporters, a young journalist raised a question that echoed in everyone's mind. "What would you say to Luca Ravelli now?" Alana smiled gently, her eyes calm and steady. "Thank you," she replied softly. The room fell silent, puzzled. "If he hadn't tried to silence me," she continued, "I might have never played at all. His actions pushed me to find my voice and share it with the world. I forgive him because holding on to anger only holds me back. But I hope he learns that true music comes from honesty and heart, not from theft or fame." Her words resonated far beyond the room. Alana's debut album, Unseen Light, released soon after, broke records. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece, an intimate journey through pain, hope, and triumph. Tracks from the album found their way into subway stations where weary commuters stopped to listen, into weddings where couples danced to its gentle melodies, and into grand concert halls where orchestras performed with reverence. Her music even transcended Earth's atmosphere. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station played her compositions during quiet moments, a symbol of humanity's unbreakable spirit reaching out into the stars. Yet, no matter how far her career took her, Alana never forgot where it all began. Years later, she returned to the humble conservatory in Atlanta, now a celebrated artist with a worldwide following. There, in a modest classroom filled with eager young faces, she gave free lessons to children who dreamed big but had been told no too many times. Her white cane tapped gently on the floor as she moved between students, offering encouragement and guidance. "If you can hear the music in your heart," she would say, "you can play it with your soul." Her students listened closely, inspired not just by her talent, but by her unwavering belief in their potential. Elena's presence was more than a lesson in music. It was a lesson in resilience, in hope, and in the power of perseverance. Every time she touched the piano keys, whether on grand stages or in that small classroom, the world listened. They listened in silence, in awe, and in gratitude, because Elena Monroe was not just a blind pianist. She was a revolution wrapped in melody, a beacon of light for all who dared to dream. Her music, born from darkness, became a symphony of courage that no one could ever silence again. Elena's story reminds us that true talent and strength don't always come in the expected forms. Sometimes those who are underestimated or mocked have the deepest wells of courage and creativity inside them. Despite the darkness she faced both in her sight and in the cruelty of others, Elena's music brought light not only to her own life but to the world. Her journey shows that authenticity and perseverance can break through even the loudest doubts and the harshest criticisms. Her story is a powerful lesson. Never judge someone by their appearance, and never underestimate the power of passion and resilience. When we open our hearts to listen, really listen, we might just discover greatness where we least expect it. Thanks for watching. If you found Elena's journey as inspiring as I did, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more incredible stories like this. Have you ever faced a moment where someone doubted you, but you surprised them anyway? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And remember, no matter what challenges life throws your way, keep believing in yourself and your dreams. Because sometimes the most unexpected voices can change the world. Until next time, stay inspired and keep shining.